We have reached the final third of the NWSL season, and I want to talk about what I believe to be the single best individual player story of the whole year. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of The Late Sub, presented by Ally Bank. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Wednesday, August 26th, and yes, I want to dive deep on this season that Ashley Sanchez is having. We're going to look at it at all angles. We're going to look at how she's performing, what her underlying stats look like, what this means for her U.S. Women's National Team prospects, and the overall MVP race at large in the NWSL, where we're seeing a lot of different types of players get a look without maybe one singular frontrunner emerging just yet with about 10 games left in this season. Lots to talk about. Let's dig in. So as always, another great weekend of NWSL action. But I think this week I want to talk top line only. We're talking a high achiever storyline. I think we've got two big things running concurrently where we're talking about some of the MVP race and the Shield race. I want to focus in on individual performances a little bit more this week. We will have some time for the Shield in the upcoming weeks because frankly, we might start seeing it get close to put away soon. But like I said, I want to talk top line, high achieving. And in terms of framing, I don't want to just kind of go down a short list here. I want to focus on one player who I think is one of the best storylines of the entire season, and then expand maybe a bit through that lens of what an MVP season is, who it's for, and what that might yield even beyond the end of the regular season for the players who we will remember as the highest performing players of the 2026 NWSL season. So the long of short of it, you probably have guessed, I would like to talk about Ashley Sanchez. She scored another 2 goals this weekend against Boston to place her atop the Golden Boot leaderboard with 13 goals. She finally overtakes Barbara Banda's 12. Now, North Carolina, we've actually had this happen a couple of times just this month. North Carolina is playing the night of this day of recording, so there might even be more by the time you actually hear this. But as of right now, we're looking at 13, top of the Golden Boot, after really inching towards Banda's tally as Banda has slowed down slightly and obviously was away for WAFCON. Now, Sanchez's continued excellence this season has obviously played a huge contribution in North Carolina, currently sitting in 6th place. They've come on very strong after that June break. They're doing a nice job of kind of hitting their points in the point of the season where you want to be playing your best football. They're only 4 points off 2nd place. So they're outside the top 4, but they have the opportunity, if they can keep this rolling, to keep making strides there. Also, love to see Sanchez really functioning as part of a really effective 1-2 punch with Evelyn EJ that we've seen at North Carolina, particularly potent in this middle third of the NWSL season in terms of the schedule. EJ has 10 goals herself. So we're talking 13 goals for Sanchez, 10 goals for EJ. That is a ridiculous scoring output between 2 players at a single club. And we're going to talk about this, but it's so fun for me to see this coming out of North Carolina, which, as we know, was not a club necessarily known for scoring a ton of goals in the last couple of years. So part of this storyline, this great story, as we know, comes from Sanchez being played out wide this season. She's been put on the left after being considered more of an interior midfield playmaker, very attacking player. Actually, we'll talk about that. A lot of her tendencies are very goal-focused. I'm not surprised that when looking at the entirety of their roster this season, North Carolina identified that actually she might become one of their primary goal scorers. I think putting someone like Sanchez closer to goal is a good idea. I think, again, we're looking at years of North Carolina kind of settling some pretty incredible attacking players further away from goal and really focusing on the buildup a little bit more. Nice to see this kind of simplify. And in that way, we've seen Sanchez not only utilizing the talents that we already know she has, but also just kind of take them to the next level. She's continuing to develop her skills as a 1v1 attacker. You don't want to get her into space. She's incredibly creative. I mean, you look at that first goal that she scored against Boston this past weekend, her head was up. She's not looking at what her feet are doing. She's thinking about 6 different things she could be doing next, whether it's a pass, a dribble, a shot. She's really crafty. She's so comfortable with the ball at her feet. And she's got that striking ability, as we've seen from long distance, as well as able to hone things in her opponent's penalty area. Now, she's become, again, in that role, a very attacking player in terms of striking. She's not as much of a passer anymore in the context of what North Carolina is asking her to do. She's sitting in the realm statistically of more of a Temwa Chawinga or a Trinity Rodman, not necessarily in position, but in terms of receiving the ball versus passing as much in open play. She has really been turned into a goal scorer and great, she's scoring those goals. There's a heads-up mentality that I really like that she's been executing, this high-level attacking play this season. And it doesn't even always show like it necessarily shows up on the stat sheet other than when actually scoring goals. Based on her personal XG stats, let's just talk about some of the things we're seeing versus some of these other MVP candidates, which again, we'll get down to later in the show. Sanchez has actually overscored her underlying movement and ball placement by a little over 4.5 goals. So she's overperforming some of her underlying stats. Now, sometimes that can be presented as a negative thing, but I think when we're talking about MVP seasons or Golden Boot seasons, it's fine to get hot. That is not something that one needs to be afraid of. You kind of imagine maybe you get back to the median by the over arc of an entire season or into a following season, but there's actually nothing wrong with the fact that we're seeing her accuracy from lower quality chances continue to rise. That in and of itself is a skill. She's already also, if you're looking at 13 goals and she's overperforming by about 4 goals, she's generating buckets of good shots, but she's just also scoring at this sort of razor's edge high clip as well. I like it. Again, it's the kind of thing that you start to look at this and say, yes, we're starting to see perhaps our Golden Boot winner come together here. And it's a great encapsulation, like I said, of what a great Golden Boot campaign is. You do want it to be a smart player with good instincts. I think there is more of a stigma against someone who's maybe more of a poacher, but as we know, a lot of different types of forward style players, sometimes it's about being at the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's about biding your time. You don't get a million touches on the ball, but what you do get, you're going to score. You want to have that healthy attack around that type of a player at the club level, which we've seen in that tandem between Sanchez and EJ. And again, just a run of form that supersedes the stats in the way that just playing red hot can do. I like that in the context of talking about when we have to sift through who do we think the best players in the league are, and then also who do we think is having the best season. I think a lot of what we're seeing for Sanchez is a little bit of both. And Sanchez, I think, like all of the other legitimate MVP candidates this season, has a story. She's the story, and it's a good story. Just from the arc of an NWSL season, it has U.S. Women's National Team's implications. It feels like a make good on some nice things that we saw in Sanchez's past, in the way that MVP is obviously about the stats. It's obviously about the performances. There are some philosophical differences about what it means for sort of like team win share and how your team is doing, but also it is a story. MVP is a story from beginning to end, and Sanchez has been, I think, the story, or one of, I guess, the major stories of the seasons thus far. Like, just to sort of break it down, right? It's a former young, highly touted prospect. She obviously becomes part of this really notable tandem with Trinity Rodman at Washington early in her career, but she's also there during a time of great turmoil for Washington, but they do also win an NWSL championship together. At that time, she's getting U.S. Women's National Team buzz. There's a lot to like about the way that she plays. She's a versatile attacker with both midfield and forward tendencies. If she wasn't kind of making these kind of audacious goals as a young player, it was this way that she would play with other people, which you feel like can be turned into something very potent. But then things start to get a little less linear for her. We know there's the abrupt trade to North Carolina in 2024. She doesn't play any minutes after making that roster at the 2023 World Cup with the U.S. Women's National Team. She's sort of that player that would get called in. She'd have some trouble making her presence felt at the international level, and then maybe she'd be on the roster, but she wouldn't play. And then ultimately, she just wouldn't spend that much time on the roster after 2023 at all. Some of that has to do with team philosophy. I mean, I remember back in the day, one of the things that people would talk about with Sanchez in terms of growing her overall game was the idea of sort of two-way ability in terms of off-the-ball defense. Sometimes there was a thought that she was working on that defensive capability in addition to what she's able to do with the ball at her feet going forward. Andonovski is going to be a pretty harsh critic when it comes to that. That was one of his tenets as a manager, both at the club level and at the international level. But you just saw a player who had so many tools in her tool bag, but it was about executing at the highest level and feeling like she knew, maybe again, in a more simplified way, what she was being asked to do, rather than having to do a million things at once, including kind of collaborating with these other star players. And then the Emma Hayes era of the U.S. Women's National Team never really takes off for Sanchez. She's not on the Paris Olympic roster. I remember she makes an appearance at the January ID camp in 2025, but not much else there for her. When asked about Sanchez earlier this year, because Sanchez, as we know, has been very, very good from the very beginning of this season, Hayes cites the switch to left winger as a factor for her not getting a look, because she says that there's added depth there behind other players on that depth chart that are both more experienced at that position, and also she felt we're a little bit closer to the core of the team. But this season, I mean, it'd be one thing if she had faded, or one thing if, we hadn't continued to see her scoring at the rate that she's scoring, or her continued comfort at that left winger position. It's undeniable. And I think it's hard to call it a comeback because she's never not been good. Some of, like I said, has sort of been an indicator of just how North Carolina has been playing football the last couple of years, that Sanchez would have these moments of attacking brilliance and then it just would kind of go away because it felt like that wasn't a priority for the team. But having Sanchez honing her skill into perhaps the best attacking performance season long at the age of 27 in her career, I do think we're also seeing that nice step, and this is the nice thing about the NWSL as an incubator, is that we're moving out of seeing her as that sort of like young player with potential status, and that's really cool, and I would like to think is very compelling for a national team manager. It's making good on the player that everyone knows that she can be. It's happening alongside this massive resurgence in North Carolina's attacking style, and she's figuring out how to lead a team. Number one A star, Ashley Sanchez. Of course, with EJ, she's got that great 1-2 punch, but I do think it's different to have a player be that sort of A1 star type player, especially now that Manaka Matsukubo is no longer in North Carolina. We're seeing Sanchez lead through example, and that example is one of the best things you can do, scoring goals. And some of this, like all soccer teams, like I said, is made possible by the Courage themselves, truly overhauling their style of play, in my opinion, very much for the better, right? They obviously very abruptly fire shot Nahas last year after months of very navel-gazing soccer. The way that all went down was a little bit strange, and you kept like kind of looking for the story there. But if you just look at it at purely soccer terms, it didn't really make sense where they were going. They were having a lot of trouble gaining traction in the NWSL standings or even in the postseason. So much buildup, so few goals. And it was really interesting last year in 2025, because I think people talked about it very positively because they were like, oh, it's not very NWSL style to play that way. But then also it just wasn't yielding results. We've actually seen a couple teams in the league have trouble with sort of that, that cognitive dissonance of wanting to play a more possessive style, but you do have to do it with purpose in this league or you're going to get blown up. It's one of the things I love about the NWSL. And it was in turn alienating certain talent. I mean, everyone knows the story, right, of Jaden Shaw, who, as a very attacking player, actually not wholly dissimilar to Sanchez, I'd say, was just having trouble finding her way on that roster. She wasn't playing a lot. She goes to Gotham, and immediately her career takes off again. Fast forward to now, new manager Mac Lind does not have the Courage playing like that at all. Now, he used to manage one of the more fun sides in Sweden, BK Häcken, who at times would really punch above their weight in Champions League football. It was always very funny to make it spelled H-A-C-K. You're making Häcken jokes watching Champions League football because they always were able to get a little bit of a foot in against European competition in a way that was very enjoyable. I'm not surprised that the NWSL came calling for him. And so after many years of a very different style, North Carolina now is second only to Kansas City in generating XG, which is, again, just sort of this accumulation of these good, high-quality scoring chances. But their penchant for also giving up goals is maybe the biggest barrier to their ascent to this sort of top four, which I think that's where they'd like to be at the end of the season. And in fact, the underlying stats indicate that some of those goals conceded came from actually lower quality shots, very similar, again, to Kansas City. If you look at statistically those two teams, they are having very similar journeys right now, which is really interesting, a little streaky. They're letting in more goals than their structure should be allowing, but also they genuinely have some of the more potent attack in the league. I think traditionally in the NWSL, you look at teams like that and you go, oh, I don't know about the Shield, but watch out in the postseason. Those are the type of teams that they can start to lock things down defensively, can be really, really dangerous, or they can get the other team into a track meet. So good news for North Carolina is that I actually think that what they're doing should be more effective than it is, just so long as they continue to clean things up as the season goes on. And that's really exciting to me. It's really fun to have. You got a couple of these teams at the top of the table talking about your Gothams, your Washingtons, your San Diegos. Those are the teams that are trying to be steady, strong. Maybe you have a dip, maybe you have some high peaks, but like they want to be as steady as possible. But then you've got a couple dark horse teams, and I think you can put, again, North Carolina and Kansas City, at least again in their style of play and what we're seeing statistically from the team stats, in a bucket there, or not least because both teams have these sort of multiple star power players that play very well in those systems, including Sanchez. And to take it to the point of the U.S. women's national team, where she was in, she was out, some struggles to make her emphasis point cross managers. Hayes has never seemed to be super interested. I really do think at this point, Sanchez's body of work should warrant another look at the U.S. women's national team senior level. It's time. They have these games in October. They have availabilities due to injuries. I just think you've got to try. I know that Hayes has her group and she loves that core that she's put together and it's very carefully cultivated, but especially with Olivia Moultrie out for the foreseeable future with that ACL tear, that is someone that Hayes really likes as that sort of tweener player who can start out wide and dip into midfield spaces or vice versa, creating a lot of running and passing lanes for teammates. You have to think of Sanchez could maybe be that player and also perhaps just literally score more goals for you because of the form that she's in. There's a lot about her background, Sanchez's background, that indicates that she could do the same thing at a high level when given the opportunity. And talk about simplifying it, talking about golden boot overlying, outperforming your stats. I do think that the scoring a lot of goals part is enough of the equation for it to matter. The left winger role for the U.S. has not yielded a ton of goals in 2026. It's become a more supplemental style of running on the flank that allows for more precision either from the team's midfield or central attack. That's fine. You need those types of players. But at what point is Sanchez actually scoring those goals at a high enough clip enough to say, yes, I think that you deserve a look on this field, perhaps over like a Shaw or an Emma Sears. I know they obviously love what Alyssa Thompson brings, but Sanchez is scoring a lot of goals at the club level. Thompson's scoring a lot of goals at the club level. I do think these things are comparable. They're still bringing Mal Swanson back into the fold. And again, I know Emma loves her core, but I just think right now, even if not forever or just try it in October, the team needs to take a look at that. And because these injury windows kind of have been a theme, right, where you lose some players and it's really, really hard, but also you see these opportunities for other players to step in with the hope that these injured players will be able to step back in after getting the good recovery that they need. That brings us a little bit to a different type of segment for us this week, but also the same. We're going to be doing the NWSL Players Association Solidarity Moment presented by Ally Bank. So real quick, we are excited to share that the Ally Award presented by our partner Ally Bank is back for the 5th year. The award is player-driven from start to finish, given to an active NWSL player nominated by their peers, decided by a vote from the NWSL Players Association members, not a front office or a brand pick. The core idea, allies don't sit on the sidelines, ties the award directly to everyday leadership, not just visible advocacy moments. And this year's winner and finalists will be announced during NWSL Championship weekend, and we're going to take some time, as you'll see here today, through the rest of the season to spotlight moments that exemplify the ally attitude, Ally Bank member FDIC. So in April, the NWSL Players Association, along with the NWSL, joined Project ACL, a global initiative focused on increasing player availability while reducing ACL injuries in women's professional soccer. Now, this research project is led by FIFPro, which is the World Players Union for Professional Footballers, and Leeds Beckett University, with a pilot that began in the WSL in England in late 2024. As we know, with great impact, several NWSL players have suffered ACL tears this season, which always highlights the current research gap and the need to understand these types of injuries more broadly. Specifically in women's football and for those who plays domestically and internationally, the impact on players' careers can be very significant. We talk about it all the time on this show, right? The player-focused study will last for 3 years, in which the data collected will be used to better understand the environmental factors that surround women's football and how ACL injuries may best be prevented. Now, as we know, ACL injuries are twice as likely to occur in women versus men, with 2/3 of those injuries coming from non-contact injury or situations. And the study intends to look at environmental factors like travel, player workload that may increase the likelihood of that injury. And with the World Cup very quickly approaching and qualifying still occurring in various regions of the world, the demands on players are only going to continue to increase. ACL research is as important as ever with that higher workload because, again, as we know, just 8% of sports science research is focused on women, and the NWSLPA and the NWSL combining efforts with FIFO and the WSL expands on that level of sports research done on elite women athletes and demonstrates what collaboration and solidarity can truly look like. And Ally Bank is doubling down on keeping fans close to the game they love with inside access to the NWSL, including our Ally Award Watch. Learn more at ally.com, Ally Bank member FDIC. Being a women's sports fan can add up quickly. From tickets, your game day fit, tailgating, getting to the game, Ally Bank gets that. Ally is dedicated to making it easier to be a women's sports fan. With Ally's accounts, you save automatically while you spend. That way, you don't have to miss the next big rivalry game and can focus on what matters to you. Learn more at ally.com. Ally Bank, member FDIC. The window's not going away. We're going to keep talking about it. And like I said, where we're going to lose some players to that window, we also might get to see some nice players emerge is the word I was looking for. And with the realities of long-term injury in mind, like I said, I'd really like to see Hayes give one of the best performers in the NWSL a look. I do fear with some of that sort of sunk cost mindset for as controlled as a roster build as the U.S. has been doing over the last, let's say, 18 months, someone like Sanchez might end up being overlooked. I know Hayes seems to really believe in her core, but that's why you do all of these challenging experiences over the course of 2026, playing Japan, playing Brazil, and now coming up playing Spain. You're not going to always have everyone you want available. And so many international managers are too reluctant to simply integrate the players in top form. I hope that doesn't happen here. But interestingly enough, all of that big pitch for the U.S. Women's National Team, despite being the best story, I also do understand how Sanchez might also ultimately not become the MVP story we all grab onto, despite doing everything in her power to perform off the charts every single week in the NWSL. It is a fascinating MVP race this year. We've seen people, lurch forward. We've seen some time off because of these international, like the one big international tournament, which is WAFCON, which, as we know, greatly impacts the NWSL for better or for worse. I think ESPN, for example, good to kind of pull this in. They re-rated the top performers in the league this year. Last week, they had Sanchez in third behind Croy Bethune, who was second, and Trinity Rodman, who was first. And American Soccer Analysis, who a lot of this stuff, when I'm talking about stats, I rely on them a lot. I really appreciate American Soccer Analysis with their public stats that they put out. They estimate Sanchez as around 9th in the league in their positive play goals added metric, which is that they put together, again, to identify positive actions on a soccer pitch, which she's actually sort of, again, in that same range, interestingly enough, talking about it, Emma Sears, direct U.S. Women's National Team competition. Now, Bethune, that metric, that goals added metric with American Soccer Analysis, that is led by Bethune. And I can't disagree that I think there are questions about whether for Sanchez being well-rounded enough on a team outside the top four, maybe they finish top four this season, but if they don't, could be an issue of landing her atop the MVP shortlist. I mean, she's definitely going to be a finalist. There's no way she's not. But if we're talking about actually winning, compared to a player like Croy Bethune, who impacts everything the current do in the attack. And like I said, their attacking stats very similar to North Carolina's. Bethune is tied for first in the league in assists. Her defensive work rate is a little bit underrated even. Her forward positive play is immense. She's just not actually scoring those goals at the same clip that Sanchez is. And as we know, not unlike North Carolina, Kansas City has been very streaky all year. I would be, frankly, surprised if Kansas City finishes in the top four. Though we'll see what happens when they get Chewinga back consistently. Obviously, Barbara Banda, my previous MVP frontrunner, has all the tools to out-execute pretty much anyone in the league. But also, it's just interesting that in her time in the NWSL, she hasn't actually done that yet. And she's faded a little bit after coming back from a disappointing WAFCON for Zambia. And Orlando is really struggling. So I think you could certainly argue that Banda is by far the MVP on her team, but the team is having some trouble. They were having trouble in her absence. They're still having a little bit of trouble with her back. She's not scoring at the same rate. You see maybe Banda giving up some lead here. Temwa Chewinga, as dangerous a goal scorer as ever. Again, hard to argue, though, that Kansas City has 2 MVP frontrunners, if you do also count Bethune, but they're outside the top 5. That doesn't make a ton of sense. Chawinga isn't the passing collaborator that Bethune is, and she has just frankly missed quite a few games due to the kind of the opposite of Banda, an incredible WAFCON run with Malawi. No fault of her own. Was awesome to see her do that. Which, like ESPN says, does put Rodman in a good place when you're looking at all the factors, as we've discussed on this podcast. She's added to her game extensively. She's the best player on one of the best teams in the NWSL. I think if you're looking at the factor of like team wins as being part of making a decision on MVP, I think you do have to start looking at these players on Gotham or these players on Washington. Gotham also very interesting. We'll talk about that in just a second. So all of which to say is there's a lot of really interesting viable candidates for MVP. They all have slight limitations and they all have kind of disparate strengths. But if Sanchez can pull NC all the way to a top 4 finish, I certainly think that helps her chances. I think those really minor questions, perhaps about defensive contributions, are a factor. Though, frankly, she tends to do more of that stuff than Rodman or Banda these days. It's just a really tight race this year, and team position and what you're being asked to do also matters. And then it comes down to then the bigger philosophies, right? Is MVP the best player on the best team? Is it the most well-rounded player in the league? Is it someone who raised their level in one particular area, like goal scoring beyond the rest of the field? Does your MVP have to touch the ball a lot? I think is a really interesting question specifically for soccer. All of which to say, it's also kind of bonkers in its own way that Gotham's likely best candidate for MVP would maybe be like a Rose Lavelle, but I don't think she is in the top 4 individual performers right now. Perhaps actually, if you're looking at the top performers for Gotham and why they're the likely Shield winners, is their defense. But also MVP isn't a scoring goals only award, but it's also the only forward line is the only position that doesn't have their own subcategory. So can a defender from Gotham make it to the MVP conversation? Could Anne-Catherine Berger make it into the MVP conversation if we are talking about best players on the best team in the league? But you also, again, you don't want it to just be a goal scoring award because that is what Golden Boot is for. It's just always kind of this circular conversation because it is a square peg round hole conversation, because of the sport that soccer is. And it's a big team sport and everyone has a different role to play. And I think it's very, very fascinating to see how people divvy up what an actual MVP is in 2026. And maybe that's just like my final thought. I don't have a ton of answers, though I think obviously we laid the case out for Sanchez. I think she would be a very worthy MVP front runner with the last kind of 10 games of the season yet to go. I think we touched on a couple performers that are doing similar numbers. But like I said, I'd be really keen to see, this would be a year where you would maybe see a defender sneak into the MVP conversation, or even, yes, a goalkeeper sneak into the MVP conversation, because there's so many disparate moments at play. And that is what makes soccer an awesome sport. It's both a very wide and a very narrow scope to figure out what an MVP is. But I would love to see Sanchez on the U.S. Women's National Team roster this October. Give her the opportunity. And I cannot wait to see what the next 10 or so games yield. And maybe we'll be having a completely different conversation by the first weekend of November. Here's to see.